Kitco News special coverage of Freedom Fest is brought to you by I Trust Capital.
Hello, I'm Michelle Makori in Rapid City, South Dakota for Freedom Fest 2021. And this year's theme is healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well, we will be focusing on the wealthy aspect with my next guest. Rich Checkan is the president and CEO of Asset Strategies International. Rich, good to have you with us.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, Rich, you were speaking at several panels
Yes.
this conference. I want to focus on the Bitcoin versus gold debate that you were speaking at. That was the theme of the debate. What's the hedge currency of the future? Bitcoin versus gold. My question is, why choose? When you have inflation, when you have concerns about dollar debasement, why choose between gold and Bitcoin? Why not allocate some of your portfolio to both?
You could have been on the panel, Michelle. I agree with you. There's no reason to choose. We've been talking about Bitcoin versus gold for the past year and a half or so, and it always comes down to which, either or, zero-sum gain, and I don't think anything could be further from the truth. They both perform, in my opinion, a different function for your portfolio, and that may change over time, but gold is proven as a store of value. We call it wealth insurance. Bitcoin, I think right now, 12 years in, is behaving as a speculation. I don't think, and I don't know, that it will always behave that way, but that's what it's doing right now. But there's a place in a portfolio for both of those things, and I think people are well served to have both.
Well, proponents of Bitcoin do see it as a store of value asset, and we're seeing more and more institutional acceptance and recognition of it. Just last week, we've got JP Morgan Chase offering Bitcoin to a range of clients. Now, this is a major about turn, considering Jamie Dimon called Bitcoin a fraud and worse than tulips. Now, his institution is offering it across the board to clients. So granted, we're seeing this institutional acceptance of Bitcoin. You don't think that it could become a store of value asset?
I think it absolutely could. It's just not there now, is my point. So as that evolves, and I think it's a good step that institutions are adopting Bitcoin, it's positive for their future. Part of the problem I think with Bitcoin is people are trying to figure out what its role is. Is it a store of value? Is it a currency? Alternative to the dollar or the yen or the euro? I don't know that it has an identity crisis. I don't know that it knows what it wants to be yet when it grows up. And I said so much on the panel. When it figures that out, I think the future is bright. I think there's something there. There's no question about it.
How do you regard Bitcoin? Do you regard it as a currency, as a store of value, or purely speculative at this point?
I think its best option going forward is as a store of value, an alternative to gold. I still think both should be in a portfolio at that point, but I don't think we're there yet. Right now, to me, it's a speculation. If it goes the route of currency, I think that's where it runs into trouble.
Because that's when central banks get really, really nervous. And we saw how the IMF sort of postured when El Salvador said that it was adopting it as legal tender. So at Freedom Fest, the whole theme is government staying out of your life.
Out of the boardroom, out of the bedroom, out of every room. Yeah.
And out of your digital wallet.
Yes.
And the concern is that government intervention in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies could be the biggest issue and the biggest threat. What do you think about that?
I agree, because I do believe that the government's power over their people is the currency. I don't think they want to have anyone or anything wrest that control from them. So I think if Bitcoin becomes important enough as an alternative currency, I think the governments are going to go after it. And it could be looking for ways to assail it, although I'm told it can't be done. It could be through taxation. There are a number of different ways governments can attack Bitcoin. And the even bigger threat, in my opinion, is CBDCs. I said this yesterday on the panel that I think central bank digital currencies were concocted in hell by Satan himself. They are incredible control by governments over everybody's bank account, and they're going to create a void of privacy for every individual citizen. I think they're horrible, but I think that's where they want to go.
It is a pretty terrifying concept if you keep in mind that the government will be able to know every single time you transact, every dollar, every cent, every time somebody pays you, every time you pay somebody. And I guess more problematic is the fact that they can cut you out of a digital system if you don't behave. And that's something we could be seeing from the People's Bank of China. But back to the idea of digital currencies from central banks, you see that as a threat to Bitcoin? Because some people see it as potentially bolstering the case for Bitcoin and for gold.
I agree. And that I see that as another threat, but not a threat to Bitcoin. Okay. I think, my personal opinion, if traditional markets fail us, the black market will emerge and fill the void every time. We've seen it throughout history in many different places and ways. So I think Bitcoin is one of the alternatives to that horrible, evil CBDC product. I also think at that point, gold and silver become your new cash.
New cash?
Yep.
Like literally trading gold and silver coins for services?
Outside of the system, as you would a dollar bill right now, yeah.
Well, on the issue of regulation, taxes, yes, definitely a threat. But people are saying it's too far gone now. That if the US government, for example, starts banning Bitcoin, then it's aligning itself with the ideals of the CCP in China. That there's just too much mainstream acceptance now on a political level, on an institutional level, on an individual level in the US for the government to actually crack down and outlaw Bitcoin, if you will. What do you say to that?
I don't know. Be honest with you, I don't know. I think, again, it's not a threat. You know, one of the options for Bitcoin is to be a form of currency, but there's not widespread adoption and penetration and so forth. So we really haven't tested that model, which is why I think it's partially acting as a speculative asset, right, and not something useful for society, if you will. So I don't know. I think we need deeper penetration, and then we'll see if it becomes a threat, what the government is capable to do to hold on to its power position.
All right, so you view it as a speculative asset. So what is the portfolio allocation that you would recommend towards Bitcoin and then, of course, towards gold and silver potentially?
And not an asset manager, right? So I can't give advice, but what I do, all right, I can share my opinion freely, is gold for me always 10% for wealth insurance. I keep it, I hold it. If I don't have a crisis, I never touch it. Okay. It's there for an emergency. That's not changing. Any speculation in my book is a 1 to 2% tops allocation. And that's where I would keep it. And if it rises in value, I would take profits and bank them in gold.
All right, let's focus on real physical gold.
Okay.
Because there is some frustration amongst the very ardent gold bugs that despite all of these inflation concerns, that gold hasn't really managed to break past the 1800 level. What are your thoughts?
I agree, it has not broken. No.
What is your thoughts on the fact that it's been stuck at that level? What is your outlook for gold over the next 6 months? Let's phrase it that way then.
Well done. Clearly higher, right? So part of the reason I think it's been stuck is really twofold. One, when gold broke out in May of 2018, right, it moved up fairly well, consolidated, was moving up again last March when the pandemic hit and the government shutdowns hit and the panic ensued and everybody went for a flight to safety to gold. And within about a month and a half, 2 months tops, it cleared 1921, the previous all-time high, and went all the way to 2075. That is way too far, way too fast. It is not healthy for any market. So the market needed to gap back, consolidate, and build for higher prices, because that's what healthy markets do. So that's all very natural. Now, some might argue that's taking a little bit longer than they expected to start moving back up in a concerted manner, but I think you've got a couple things going on. Let's face it, the Fed, and I've been super critical of the Fed. I think all they have left are words to try and dissuade opinion, to influence people, and to establish confidence in the dollar. And I think their words are still being grasped and held onto and acted on. And I don't know why. I don't think they have any credibility right now. They have no ammunition other than words and maybe, yield curve control. So I think a lot of that is what's going on, holding it down a little bit, but I liken it to a pressure cooker. The pressure will build to a point and free markets will take over and that cover will explode.
When? That's always the question.
Yeah.
And what would be the trigger?
So used to have a gentleman work for you by the name of John Nadler for many years. And one of good friends of John, one of my favorite quotes from John was, if you buy gold for the right reason, there is no such thing as the wrong time or the wrong price. I would say, I don't know exactly in the future, but as long as we are measuring gold by mismanaged fiat dollars, euro, yen, what have you, the price will go up over time. It doesn't mean in the short term it can't come down, but in the long term it will always go up. Buy well at an extended dip and be patient is all I can suggest. And I'll never give you a price and a date together.
Okay.
I've been doing it long enough to know not to do that.
All right, but patience is a virtue, and certainly the gold bug is a virtue of choice, it would appear. But I want to focus a little bit on silver, because there's been some frustration as well that silver hasn't been rallying as one would expect. And we had the Reddit silver squeeze situation in February, the GameStop Reddit situation in February, and that led to
a crazy 3-4 days.
It really was. And that led to increased speculation that there is manipulation in the silver market. What do you think about that?
Well, I will tell you, in terms of manipulation, first off, I think every single market is manipulated some way or another by someone. Okay, it could be through words, it could be through interest rates, it could be, you name it. Every market is manipulated. There is growing evidence when you look at the LIBOR issues and the investigations into the fixing in the metals markets, that there is some untoward activities going on there as well. So I'm not ruling that out. But I think with silver, the bigger issue is not so much that there's a shortage. I think with silver, the bigger issue is there wasn't a shortage of silver bullion. There was a shortage of fabricated coins and bars in the form that people could take delivery, because demand spiked at a time when sentiment was already low. So the forecasted production was lower than demand. And they had real physical constraints of moving metal around in airplanes during COVID. They had to do shift work. They had to be socially distanced. They couldn't produce at full capacity if they wanted to. And I think all that converged and had an impact.
Okay, so what do you say to the notion that there really isn't enough physical silver out there to cover the paper silver?
Again, I've 26 years doing this, I've never had an issue where I couldn't get silver. I may not have always gotten it in the right form that I wanted at the time, but there's always some form available. There's still, I think, plenty of silver out there, and I think the futures market, there's more paper silver being traded than there actually is physical silver to back it up. Yeah, now that may be changing here with Basel III, right? So there's going to be different requirements there for holding unallocated silver, et cetera, and they're going to have to hold it in a different way, and that may have an impact. The question is, what's going to be the impact on the price going forward when all that takes place?
Speaking of the price of silver, the Biden administration's infrastructure bill, some version of it in one way or another is going to be passed, most likely. And that's very bullish for silver, considering it's a critical component of decarbonization and clean energy. What is your price forecast on silver given that, or do you think it's already been priced in?
I don't think it's been priced in yet, but I do think it will have an impact. I think demand will continue. Once silver gets going like it has in previous bull markets, where it follows, catches, and outpaces gold to the upside, I think that alone will create demand for more buyers looking to have a profit in silver. Couple that with all the industrial demand that's going to come from the green energy initiatives, I think it's a very positive outlook for silver going forward.
All right, before I let you go, you said that you have some cautionary words for those purchasing gold and silver on the retail level?
Gotcha. I'd like to share this, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. And I will say that everything you've said has been brilliant. And if you only rethink of one thing I say, remember this, okay? If you're going to buy precious metals from a dealer, ask one question from the start. When I'm ready, will you buy back? And if the answer to that question is no, regardless of how nice they are, regardless of whatever story they weave about why they don't buy back, understand you should never buy from them, right? And the reason for that is simply they're embarrassed about the high premiums they're charging on the buy side. So when they buy it back, you sell it back, they would be exposed. I've seen this happen, play out time and time again. As people want more metal and the price is rising higher, greed will kick in. Predators are greedy and they will take advantage of honest, good people. If they don't buy back, don't buy.
All right, we'll focus on the wise part of the healthy, wealthy, and wise theme of Freedom Fest, and we will leave it with that pearl of wisdom on purchasing gold and silver at the retail level. Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Rich Checkan, President and CEO of Asset Strategies International. Thank you.
Kitco News special coverage of Freedom Fest is brought to you by I Trust Capital.